I'd like you to meet Dr. Trevor Purcell. He is chair of the Department for Africana Studies at the University of South Florida. Hi.
Hi, delighted to be here.
I'm glad to have you. And you are on this committee that is launching the Tampa's Earth Charter Community Indicators. And so I'm going to ask you, why is the Earth Charter such a good thing? Why are we using that for this framework? What is the...
Well, the Earth Charter is a good thing because it addresses what I think are some of the most important values in human existence. And that is the value of cooperativeness, reciprocity, and trust. And in a more general sense, those values are necessary if we're going to preserve our communities. And preserving our communities mean also preserving that on which we depend on for survival, which is respect for nature, social justice, a culture of morality, and all of that. I mean, a healthy community, these are the things that go into making up a very healthy community. So to the extent that the Earth Charter promotes these things, it is promoting our survival ultimately.
And you're quite familiar with this sense of community and connectedness, I understand. You're from the Caribbean islands, right?
I am from the Caribbean, yes.
So
yes,
tell me about your experience around community there.
Well, in the Caribbean, let me say that not only am I from the Caribbean, but I am from a rural, agrarian area of the Caribbean. And growing up in those circumstances, you cannot but respect cooperativeness and interdependency on one another. Imagine, for example, if you're in a rural area where the nearest hospital is 12 miles away, the nearest market is 12 miles away, and someone is sick and has to go to the hospital. You have to have others. They take you, put you on a stretcher and literally carry you to the nearest bus to get you to the nearest hospital. So your life depends on the type of relationships that you have cultivated for generations that depend on one another. Everything you do in a rural area, preparing your land for farming, building a house, you cannot do by yourself. So everything depends on others. And so you are forced to really, you cannot take human relations or community relations for granted because your survival depends on them. In a way, in anthropology, we say that you are not just, you don't just give out of kindness, you give because you're obligated to give, and you receive because you're obligated to receive, because your survival depends on it.
So that's why this sense of community and social connectedness is so important.
The sense of community is a fabric of our existence. As we're social beings,
right.
And in a developed, complex urban society, it is not as evident because we can survive as individuals.
Right.
In many other parts of the world, in the less economically developed areas, in poorer countries, and particularly in agrarian rural areas, you cannot survive without connectedness to other people.
And I'm familiar with the Commission on for Children at Risk,
right,
in which they cited, I think, 269 studies that showed that children with anxiety and depression were most often linked to lack of that social connectedness. So it's deeply important.
It is deeply important. It's interesting, there are two, I was reading some material on psychological therapy, and there's a Western model of psychological therapy and a non-Western model of psychological therapy. In the Western countries, if you're sick, it's claimed that it's a disintegration of your ego, and therefore therapy means you're putting back the self together. The other model is the opposite of that. If you're psychologically ill, it means that it's a disintegration of your relationship with the community. And so therapy is putting back, reconstituting your relationships with the community.
With others.
And it's not by chance that the Western model is different, because this is where capitalism is most developed.
Right.
And capitalism contributes to individualism, which has its good points.
Right.
But it is not... You require a balance of that individualism with cooperative, reciprocity, trust, and all of that for psychological and social health.
Yeah, I think we're definitely out of whack with our emphasis on individualism.
We are a bit
this
out
country.
of whack, yeah.
And so I'm going to ask you then, how do we change that? What can we build that in a community?
I think we can build it. It can, in the first place, it still exists. in many parts of even the United States, in the Midwest, in farm areas, and so on. And it certainly exists in many other parts of the world. And we can build it by building in cooperativeness in the type of things we do. I can give you one example that I've studied in the Caribbean, and that is an institution called the Rotating Savings and Credit Association. And it's an association where people pool their resources for saving and making credit. And they've been using this for generations at a time when blacks in the Caribbean did not have access to banks. Mm-hmm. And they've been able to, let's say 10 people work together, every time they get paid, they put a certain amount to a banker or an organizer. Right. And each cycle, each 10-week, a different person gets the lump sum. Now, using this institution, it survives because it depends on reputation and it depends on trust among one another. There are no legal instruments that you can use for conformity. You simply have to trust people to do this. And by using this, people have been able to survive in these areas by accumulating capital for investment, for schooling, for improving their homes, all sorts of things they use it for. And that institution, not only has it survived, but it's thriving in the Caribbean.
And I understand that's one of your reasons for wanting to be involved in the project.
Precisely.
Is your belief in the island economies.
Yes.
And weaving that into the Indicator project. So that would then show self-sufficiency.
Self-sufficiency, absolutely. Well, I think one of the values of the Earth Charter as well is people making decisions about their own lives.
Right.
And self-sufficiency is an integral part of being able to be self-define and to define your own existence.
Well, it'd be really exciting to measure that. And as Frank said earlier, once you start to measure something, it's when you change. So
absolutely.
That would have that grow, that
absolutely.
aspect of the community.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Purcell. I really, really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.